There is one question we did talk about over lunch that we would go back to something we discussed. One of the contentions we've already covered, mainly contention 1. And we had a question for the applicant. Since I'm springing this on you, if you want to postpone your answers till later, that's fine. But let me run the question by you. Essentially, it's where in the environmental report the interaction between any thermal plume from Fermi 3 and the plume that's been alleged to result from the existing coal-fired plant in Monroe, where, if anywhere, is that covered in the environmental report?
I had that information, and we'll get back to you on that later this afternoon.
Okay. Feel free to bring it up whenever you're ready. All right, let's go to contention 7, and Mr. Camp, you may proceed on that.
Thank you. Our first major point that we'd like to make concerns NRC's statement that coal-fired power plants in Monroe County are not licensed by NRC, and the coal plant's activities are not part of the application currently under consideration. For us, this raises doubts as to how seriously the NRC is taking its NEPA obligation to analyze cumulative radiological impacts. The point that we're trying to make is that this area on the western basin of Lake Erie and Lake Erie as a whole has significant radiological emissions coming from the coal-burning power plants. So right here in Monroe, we've got 3 coal-fired power plants. There's the Trenton coal plant. There's DTE's own Monroe coal power plant, which at 3,300 megawatts electric is one of the largest in North America. We also have Consumers Energy's Whiting coal plant. Not too far down the shoreline is the Bay Shore coal plant in Toledo. And then on Lake Erie's northern shore in Ontario is the Nanticoke coal power plant, which at 4,000 megawatts electric reportedly is the largest coal burner in all of North America. And so our point is that the radiological emissions, as we're so often reminded by the industry, are significant. And their point in reminding us of that is they're trying to say that the radiological emissions from the nuclear power plants, by comparison, are insignificant. But we would like to see that the radiological emissions from the coal burners are addressed in this proceeding by the NRC.
Essentially another cumulative impact type argument. We need to address not only the individual impact of Fermi 3, but the cumulative impact of the existing coal-fired plants and Fermi 3 when it goes into operation. Okay?
Yes.
Now, in this contention, are you taking issue with the limits that the NRC sets on exposure, human exposure to radionuclides, to radioactivity?
No, really our main concern is that the modeling by both the company and by the NRC, especially regarding the change from design control document 4 to 5, is inadequate because they've gone from a single vent release pathway for radioactive gases to now 3. And our point is that introducing multiple radiological gas vents and release points, one from the reactor building, one from the fuel building, and one from the rad waste building, would put those releases in closer proximity to various subpopulations of the Fermi 3 workforce over time, as well as to certain subpopulations of area residents. And from the best of our reading of the application thus far, this has not been adequately modeled to determine that the releases now coming from multiple points are not impacting subpopulations more than previously considered.
Is it your understanding that the modeling that's in the application was based on 1 stack and that they subsequently switched to a 3-stack design, or?
That, and that there seems to be omitted information about the heights of the vents, wind patterns in the exact area, the proximity to the various work sites at Fermi 3. Another concern we have is that the issue of radioactive particle fallout is neglected and possible hotspots. The way that the applicant and the NRC staff seem to address this issue is to assume that any noble gases released from the operations of Fermi 2 simply blow away on the wind. But in fact, they have very relatively short half-lives, so that noble gases such as xenon and krypton will change into biologically significant solids such as cesium and strontium that can fall out on the lake, fall out on the soil, and have impacts on the workforce or area residents. Another point that I wanted to make is something that Detroit Edison put in its response that was very perplexing to us. They seem to be indicating that a 50-fold increase in radioactivity dosage to a person would have no impact on the health damage caused by that radiation. This was when they were pointing out that a worker dose up to 5 grams permitted per year would have no health impact different than a member of the general public who has a limit of 100 milligram per year. So we just don't understand their point, because it seems to fly in the face of the linear no threshold theory, which a lot of our arguments are based on the biological effects of ionizing radiation report, the 7th iteration from the National Academy of Sciences. And I'll just conclude that there is evidence. We've cited a couple reports that appeared in, for example, the European Journal of Cancer Care, that there are increases in radioactivity associated with nuclear power plants, and specifically some of this data has been presented in our filings by Drs. Jeanette Sherman and Joe Mangano on increases in cancer rates around the Fermi nuclear power plant. And we feel that one of the issues that was not addressed by the NRC staff or the applicant is local residents who also work at Fermi 3 as construction workers. That seems not to have been addressed in their application.
Do any of the members of the organizations that are petitioners, are any of their members workers at the plant? Well, let me limit it to those who've actually filed affidavits. It's kind of hard to know who the others are. But I don't recall seeing anybody who appeared to be an employee of the plant.
Not to the best of our knowledge, no. It's possible, since our organizations have thousands of members, that there may be. And certainly, because Fermi has not hired workers yet for Fermi 3, we don't know. That's a part of the confusion of this proceeding, that it seems to be so rushed, and we've asked multiple times for delays so that we could better take part and address these concerns, and that's a real example of that.
Okay. All right, do you want to reserve the rest of your time
Yes,
for rebuttal?
please.